Welcome to subscribe.
You know what they say about family photos? They're supposed to capture the love, the togetherness, the perfect little moments you want to frame and hang on the wall. But sometimes, what they really capture is the truth nobody wants to look at. My daughter-in-law Jessica started planning this family photo shoot 3 months ago. 3 months. You'd think she was organizing a presidential visit, the way she went on about it. It has to be coordinated, Eleanor, she told me over the phone, her voice already sounding like she was running a board meeting. Cream and beige tones. Nothing too loud. Nothing that screams, you know. She didn't finish that sentence. She didn't have to. I knew exactly what she meant. Nothing that screams poor. I'm 68 years old. I've been a widow for 22 of those years. I raised my son Mike on a teacher's salary, which means we never had much, but we always had enough. My house is small, my car is old, and my sweaters have been mended more times than I can count. But they're clean. They're warm. And they were bought with honest money. The morning of the photo shoot, I stood in front of my closet for a good 20 minutes. I don't have cream. I don't have beige. I have what I have. So I picked out my best sweater, dark blue, a little faded at the elbows, but I'd reinforced the cuffs just last winter. I'd bought it for Mike's high school graduation. That was 20 years ago. Still fits. Still keeps me warm. I drove over to Mike and Jessica's place in my '98 Corolla. The muffler's been making this rattling sound lately, like there's a handful of pennies trapped somewhere underneath. Mike keeps saying he'll take a look at it. Keeps saying. Their house is one of those new builds in the Ridgewood subdivision. Big. Beige. The kind of place where every lawn looks like it was cut with nail scissors. Jessica's prized possession, aside from her Instagram account, is that lawn. She has a guy come out twice a week to spray it with God knows what. Not a dandelion in sight. Not a single thing that looks real. I parked on the street. Didn't want my car dripping oil on their driveway again. Jessica mentioned it once. Eleanor, there's a spot. Like I hadn't noticed. Like I'd done it on purpose. The front door was open. There were people everywhere. Jessica's friends, mostly. Women in matching earth tones, holding glasses of something sparkling, laughing a little too hard at each other's jokes. And then there was the photographer. An older gentleman, maybe 70, with silver hair and a quiet way about him. He was setting up his equipment in the living room, adjusting lights on tall stands, not talking to anyone. Just working. Jessica spotted me the second I walked in. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. It never does. Eleanor. You're here. She looked me up and down. The smile got tighter. That's what you're wearing. I thought blue would be fine, I said. It's my best sweater. Blue. She said the word like it was a disease. I specifically said cream and beige. I sent an email. Mike said he forwarded it to you. I don't have email. Jessica knows this. Mike knows this. But it's easier for them to pretend they forgot than to pick up the phone and actually talk to me. Jessica, I don't think anyone's gonna be looking at my sweater, I said, trying to keep it light. They'll be looking at you and Mike and the kids. The point is coordination, Eleanor. Cohesion. She broke the word into pieces like she was talking to a child. When we look back at these photos in 20 years, I don't want people asking who the woman in the ratty blue sweater is. Ratty. She called my sweater ratty. I felt something sink in my chest. Not anger, exactly. Something heavier than that. Something that's been sinking for years, every time Jessica introduces me to her friends as Mike's mother instead of my mother-in-law. Every time I'm seated at the far end of the Thanksgiving table, next to the kids' table, like I'm one step away from needing a booster seat. Mike came in from the backyard, holding a platter of something wrapped in prosciutto. He was wearing a cream-colored sweater. Of course he was. Jessica probably laid it out on the bed for him this morning. Hey, Mom. He gave me a quick kiss on the cheek. His eyes did that thing they always do now, flicked to Jessica, then back to me, then away. You look nice. He's a terrible liar. Always has been. When he was 8, he tried to convince me the dog ate his homework. The dog was a Chihuahua. The homework was a poster board. Thanks, sweetheart, I said anyway. Because that's what mothers do. We let our sons lie to us when the truth would hurt too much. Jessica's friends were starting to notice the tension. You know how women like that are. They can smell drama from 3 rooms away, and they circle around it like seagulls at a picnic. Jessica, is everything okay? One of them asked. Her name was Meredith. I recognized her from last year's Christmas party. She'd asked me if I was the caterer. Fine, fine, Jessica said, waving her hand. Just a little wardrobe confusion. Eleanor, come with me. I think I have something in the guest room that might work. She grabbed my arm. Harder than she needed to. Led me down the hallway like I was a misbehaving student being marched to the principal's office. Eleanor, I'm going to be honest with you, she said, her voice low so no one else could hear. You look like you just walked out of a thrift store. And I don't mean one of the cute vintage ones. I mean the kind where everything smells like mothballs and sadness. I didn't say anything. What was there to say? She wasn't wrong about the thrift stores. I do shop at them. When your pension check barely covers your medication, you learn to appreciate a good bargain. I've worked really hard for today, she went on. These photos are going on our Christmas card. They're going on my Instagram. Important people are going to see them, people I do business with, people from the club. Do you understand what I'm saying? I understood. I'd always understood. To Jessica, I wasn't family. I was a liability. A walking, breathing reminder that her perfect life was built only 1 generation away from hardship. That her husband came from something a lot closer to dirt than her precious cream-colored sweaters. I'm sorry, I said. I can leave if that's easier. God, no. Then people would ask questions. She pinched the bridge of her nose. Just, stay in the back. For the group shots, we'll put you on the end. And for God's sake, don't smile too wide. She left me standing in the hallway. I stood there for a minute, listening to the laughter from the living room, the clinking of glasses, the soft classical music playing from hidden speakers. Everything in that house was designed to look effortless and beautiful. Everything but me. I was about to turn around and walk out the front door when I felt a hand on my shoulder. Gentle. Steady. I turned. It was the photographer. The quiet old man with the silver hair. Eleanor, he said. Not ma'am. Not Mrs., just my name. Like he knew me. And then I looked at his face. Really looked. And something stirred in the back of my memory. Something old. Something from another lifetime. Thomas, I whispered. His name came back to me before his face did. Thomas Carver. My husband Frank's best friend. They'd served together in Vietnam, back when they were both just boys pretending to be men. I wasn't sure you'd remember me, he said, his voice rough like gravel worn smooth by a river. I couldn't speak. I just stared at him. The last time I'd seen Thomas Carver was at Frank's funeral, 22 years ago. He'd flown in from somewhere out west. Stood in the back of the church. Didn't say a word. Just saluted the casket and left before anyone could thank him for coming. Jessica hired you, I finally managed to say. Small world, he said. Although I suspect it feels a lot smaller for you than for her. I almost laughed. Almost. Listen to me, Eleanor. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. I saw what happened just now. I've been watching all morning. That woman, your son's wife, she has no idea who she's dealing with. I'm not dealing with anyone, Thomas. I'm just trying to get through the day. No. He shook his head firmly. Not today. Not anymore. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out an envelope. It was old. The kind of envelope that's been handled many times, the paper soft at the edges, the seal worn thin. What is this? I asked. Everything she thinks she has? Everything she thinks matters? He pressed the envelope into my hands. His fingers were trembling slightly. It all started with this. With you and Frank. And she needs to know. Thomas, I don't understand, open it later. When the time is right. He glanced toward the living room, where Jessica's laughter was rising above the others, sharp and eager. I have a job to do today. Taking pictures. Capturing the truth. That's what good photographers do, Eleanor. We capture what's really there, whether people want to see it or not. He walked away before I could ask anything else. Walked back to his lights and his cameras and his quiet professionalism. I stood in the hallway, holding that envelope, my heart beating faster than it had in years. From the living room, Jessica's voice rang out. Eleanor. We're ready. And for heaven's sake, try to stand up straight. I looked down at the envelope. Through the worn paper, I could feel something stiff inside. A photograph. What could possibly be in this envelope? What could a man I hadn't seen in 22 years possibly have to give me that would matter to anyone in that room? I didn't know yet. But Thomas Carver had just set something in motion. And somewhere deep in my chest, underneath the old blue sweater that Jessica hated so much, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope. I walked into that living room like I was walking into a courtroom. That's the best way I can describe it. The envelope was in my hand, half hidden against my leg, and my heart was doing something between a flutter and a hard knock. Jessica had turned our living room into a photography studio. She'd moved the couch, the coffee table, everything. 3 big lights on metal stands pointed at the empty fireplace like it was some kind of altar. White sheets draped over the windows to control the light, she'd told me earlier. As if God's own sunlight wasn't good enough for a family picture. There you are, Jessica said, her voice all sugar-coated efficiency. She was standing next to a tall young woman with a clipboard, her party planner, I guess. Everything in Jessica's life had a coordinator. We're almost ready. The photographer wants to do a few test shots first. I nodded. Didn't say much. My throat felt tight. Mike came over and touched my arm. You okay, Mom? He looked at my face, then down at my hand. Saw the envelope. What's that? I pulled it closer to my side. Nothing. Something Thomas gave me. Old friends. Thomas? You know the photographer? Before I could answer, Jessica's voice cut through. Mike. Can you come here for a second? We need to figure out the arrangement. Mike gave me a look, the same look he'd been giving me since he was 12 years old, the one that said he was sorry about something but didn't know how to fix it, and walked over to his wife. I looked down at the envelope. The paper was yellowed, soft at the edges. I could feel the photograph inside, stiff and promising. I thought about opening it right then and there, but something stopped me. Maybe it was Thomas's voice in my head, everything your daughter-in-law has started with this. Started with what? What could possibly connect Jessica's perfect, Instagram-ready life to a brown envelope from a man I hadn't seen since Frank's funeral? Thomas Carver was over by his equipment case, changing a lens. He didn't look at me. Didn't need to. He knew I was holding his secret close. Okay, everyone, Jessica announced, clapping her hands like we were third graders on a field trip. Thomas wants to do the test shots now. Positions, please. She'd already decided the arrangement. Mike and Jessica in the center, of course. The kids, our grandkids, little Emma and Tyler, in front. Jessica's parents, who'd flown in from Scottsdale, on her side. And me? Eleanor, you're over here. She pointed to the far left edge, almost behind one of the light stands. We need the visual balance. Visual balance. That's what she called it. I walked to my spot. Said nothing. I've learned over the years that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is just show up and be quiet. Let people show you exactly who they are. Thomas stepped forward, adjusting the big camera on its tripod. He moved with the kind of care you see in men who've done the same thing for 40 years. No wasted motion. All right, everyone. Just relax. This is just to check the lighting. His voice was calm, professional. Mrs. Henderson, could you tilt your chin just slightly? Jessica tilted her chin. Gave him her best smile. The one she used on her LinkedIn profile. Perfect. And Mr. Henderson, Mike, is it? Relax your shoulders. You look like you're waiting for a root canal. A couple of people laughed. Mike's shoulders dropped an inch. Thomas looked through the viewfinder, then stepped back. He walked over to one of the lights and adjusted it. Then he walked over to another one. Then he stood still for a moment, looking at all of us like we were pieces on a chessboard he'd seen 100 times before. You know, he said, not to anyone in particular, I've been doing this for 38 years. Family portraits, weddings, corporate events. And I've learned one thing. He paused, clicked the shutter once. The camera never lies. But people do. The room got a little quieter. Jessica's smile flickered. Well, we're all about authenticity here. Right, everyone? Nobody answered. Thomas took another picture. Then another. Click. Click. The flashes made little white spots dance in my eyes. Mrs. Henderson, Thomas said, lowering his camera. Your dress is beautiful. May I ask where you got it? Jessica brightened. Oh, it's actually a designer piece. From a little boutique in New York. I had it shipped specially for today. Thomas nodded slowly. And your shoes? Jimmy Choo. I see. He raised the camera again, but didn't take a picture. Just looked through it. And Mrs. Eleanor Henderson. Your sweater. Where did you get that? The question landed in the room like a stone in still water. I looked down at the blue wool. At the patched elbow. At the threads I'd sewn myself, late at night, because I couldn't bear to throw away the last nice thing Frank ever picked out for me. I bought it, I said quietly, at a store that closed 20 years ago. For my son's high school graduation. Jessica laughed, but it was a tight laugh. Mom's very sentimental about old things. Thomas didn't laugh. He clicked the shutter. Pointed at me. Sentimental, he said, is just another word for loyal. Isn't it, Mrs. Henderson? I met his eyes. Yes. I suppose it is. Something was shifting in that room. I could feel it, like the air before a summer storm. Jessica felt it too. She started talking faster. Thomas, maybe we should do some different groupings? You know, just the immediate family first, and then we can add others later. For variety. She meant me. She wanted me out of the frame. Thomas lowered the camera again. Looked at Jessica for a long moment. Mrs. Henderson, in my experience, the best photographs come from not controlling everything. The light does what it does. People stand where they stand. And sometimes, he paused, and his voice dropped just a little. Sometimes the person you think should be at the edge is actually the one holding everything together. Jessica's smile froze. I'm not sure I was in Vietnam, Thomas said suddenly, turning back to his camera. Did you know that? Long time ago. Before most of you were born. Nobody said anything. I was a young photographer then too. Took pictures for the army newspaper. And one day, during a firefight, I got hit. Took shrapnel in my leg. Couldn't walk. Couldn't crawl. Just lay there in the mud, waiting to die. He adjusted the focus. Clicked the shutter. The flash lit up the room. And then this man, this big, quiet man from Ohio, came back for me. Dragged me through 40 yards of gunfire. Saved my life. My hand started shaking. That man, Thomas said, was named Frank Henderson. The room went absolutely still. Mike turned to look at me. His face was pale. Dad? Jessica's mother put her hand to her chest. Her father cleared his throat. Thomas kept working, adjusting lights like he hadn't just dropped a bomb in the middle of Jessica's perfect afternoon. I lost track of Frank after the war. People drift apart. But I never forgot him. Made a promise to myself that if I ever got the chance to do something for his family, I would. He walked over to his equipment case and pulled out a small framed photograph. Held it up for everyone to see. This is Frank. 1969, right before he shipped out. I couldn't see it clearly from where I stood, but I didn't need to. I knew that picture. Frank, young and strong, in his uniform. The same picture that sat on my nightstand for 40 years. I didn't know, Thomas said, that the Hendersons were my Hendersons until I walked into this house today. Until I saw Eleanor standing in that hallway. And until I heard, he stopped. Looked at Jessica. Until I heard how she was being spoken to. Jessica's face went through about 6 different expressions in 3 seconds. I didn't mean, Mrs. Henderson, Thomas said, his voice still calm and professional, you hired me to take the perfect family photograph. And I will do that. But I want to make sure that when people look at this picture 10 years from now, they see the truth. Not just nice clothes and expensive shoes. He walked over to me. Gently took the envelope from my hand. Eleanor, he said quietly, may I? I couldn't speak. I just nodded. He opened the envelope. Pulled out the photograph inside, an old black and white picture, cracked at the edges, showing a young woman holding a baby. Me. Holding Mike. Standing in front of a tiny house that had a for sale sign in the yard. The same house Frank and I sold to pay for Mike's college tuition. This, Thomas said, holding it up, is what I meant when I said everything started here. 25 years ago, Frank and Eleanor Henderson sold their home, their only asset, to pay for their son's education. The son who now stands here today, married, successful, with a beautiful family of his own. Mike's jaw was working. He looked at me, then at Jessica, then back at me. Mom? You sold the house? I thought you moved because it was time, I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt. That's what I told you. It was easier than explaining. Jessica's mother was crying quietly. Her father had taken off his glasses and was cleaning them. Thomas put the photograph back in the envelope and handed it to me. Now, he said, walking back to his camera, let's take the real picture. Eleanor, if you would, please stand next to your son. In the center, where you belong. Jessica opened her mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. For the first time since I'd met her, she had nothing to say. I walked to the center of the group. Mike put his arm around me. I could feel him trembling. Everyone ready? Thomas asked. Nobody answered. Good, he said. Now, I want you all to think about one thing. Think about what really matters. Not the clothes. Not the image. But the people who loved you before you had anything to offer in return. Those are the faces I want to capture. He raised the camera. And Mrs. Henderson, Jessica, you might want to smile. This is going to be the most important photograph your family ever takes. The flash went off like thunder. And I knew, standing there in my old patched sweater, surrounded by lights and white sheets and people who'd never really seen me before, that Thomas Carver had just turned that room upside down. The real story hadn't even started yet. The flash left spots dancing in front of my eyes. For a second, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The room felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for something none of us could name. Thomas lowered the camera. Got it, he said quietly. That's the one. Jessica blinked hard, her perfectly applied mascara smudging just a little at the corners. She looked around the room like she'd just woken up in a stranger's house. Her friends, the ones she'd been trying so hard to impress, were staring at her differently now. You know that look? The one that says, "I thought I knew you." Is someone going to explain what's happening here? That was Brenda. One of Jessica's tennis friends. She had her arms crossed, her champagne glass dangling from her fingers. Who exactly is this woman? And what's the story with the photograph? I stood there in the center of that circle of lights, my son's arm still around my shoulders, feeling every year of my 68 years. My old sweater suddenly didn't feel so heavy anymore. Maybe, Thomas said, setting his camera down on a side table, Mrs. Henderson should explain it herself. All eyes turned to Jessica. She opened her mouth. Closed it. For the first time since I'd known her, my daughter-in-law looked small. Not young, just small. Like someone had let the air out of her. It's nothing, she said finally, her voice thin. It's just old history. Family stuff. You know how it is. No, Thomas said. His voice was calm but there was steel underneath it. No, I don't think they do know how it is. I don't think anyone in this room knows how it really is. Mike squeezed my shoulder. I could feel him shaking. My boy. My quiet, gentle boy who'd spent 10 years trying to keep peace between two women who lived in different worlds. He'd never known the truth either. I'd never told him. What was the point? You don't tell your children about sacrifices you made for them. That's not why you make them. Your mother-in-law, Thomas said, turning to face the room full of guests, is the reason any of you are standing here today. And I don't mean that as a figure of speech. I mean it literally. Brenda set down her champagne glass. So did a few of the other women. Even the husbands, who'd been checking their phones and looking bored, started paying attention. 45 years ago, Thomas said, I was a 22-year-old kid lying face down in the mud somewhere outside Da Nang. I'd been hit. Bad. Couldn't move my legs. Couldn't feel my left arm. The medevac wasn't coming. I knew I was going to die in that jungle, 10,000 miles from home. He paused. Looked at me. His eyes were wet. Then Frank showed up. Mike's arm tightened around me. Hearing his father's name, my Frank's name, spoken out loud in this room full of strangers. It did something to my chest. Something I can't explain. Frank was my sergeant, Thomas went on. He didn't have to come back for me. Anybody else would have left me there. The smart play was to leave me there. But Frank, he wasn't built that way. He threw me over his shoulder and he carried me. 40 yards. Under fire. Got me to cover. Saved my life. He reached into his jacket and pulled out that envelope again. The one he'd handed me in the kitchen. He opened it and took out not one photograph but two. The first one I showed Eleanor already, he said, holding it up. This is the house Frank and Eleanor sold to put Mike through college. Sold their only home. Moved into that little rental over on Maple Street. The one with the bad roof and the heater that never worked right. Some of Jessica's friends shifted their weight. Looked at the floor. But this one, he held up the second photograph. An old black and white shot, creased and faded at the edges. This one I've carried in my wallet for 40 years. It's me and Frank. 2 weeks before the ambush. 2 weeks before he saved my life. He passed it around. The room was dead silent as those glossy, well-dressed women and their successful husbands looked at a picture of two skinny boys in dirty uniforms, grinning at the camera like they didn't have a care in the world. When I came home, Thomas said, I tried to find Frank. Took me years. By the time I tracked him down, he was already gone. Cancer. 1989, I was too late to thank him. Too late to pay him back. His voice cracked. Just a little. But in that quiet room, it sounded like a gunshot. So I made myself a promise. I'd find his family. His wife. His son. And if there was ever anything at all I could do for them, I'd do it. No questions asked. Jessica made a sound. Something between a cough and a sob. Her face was blotchy now. The careful mask she wore every day was coming apart at the seams. When Jessica hired me for this job, Thomas said, turning to look directly at her, I didn't know she was Frank's daughter-in-law. Didn't know until I walked into this house and saw Eleanor standing in the kitchen, wearing that sweater her husband gave her 40 Christmases ago. Recognized her immediately. She's got the same eyes Frank had. The same quiet dignity. He walked over to where Jessica was standing. She flinched. Like she thought he might hit her or something. But Thomas just stood there, looking at her with something that wasn't quite anger and wasn't quite pity. You told her she looked too poor for your family photos, he said. You said she'd ruin the picture. Those were your words. I heard them. Brenda let out a little gasp. So did one of the other women. Jessica's face went from blotchy to pale. I've met a lot of people in my life, Thomas said. I've photographed presidents. CEOs. Movie stars. People who think they're important because they've got money or power or fame. And you know what I've learned? Nobody answered. None of that matters. Not one bit of it. What matters is what you do when nobody's watching. What matters is who you are when the cameras aren't rolling. And you, he pointed at Jessica. You've got a woman standing in your kitchen who gave up everything for your husband. Who sold her home. Who worked 2 jobs after her husband died. Who never asked for a single thing in return. Who wore a patched sweater to your party because she thought it was the nicest thing she owned. And you told her she wasn't good enough. The silence that followed was the heaviest thing I've ever felt. Thick as fog. Cold as winter. Jessica's shoulders started shaking. She wasn't crying exactly, not yet. But she was close. Her hands were clenched at her sides, her knuckles white. I didn't know, she whispered. Mike never told me about any of this. I didn't know about the house. About his father. About any of it. No, I said. My voice came out stronger than I expected. Everyone turned to look at me. You didn't know because you never asked. I stepped forward, out of Mike's arm. Walked over to where Jessica was standing. Up close, she looked exhausted. All those years of trying to be perfect. All that effort to impress people who probably didn't care about her at all. You never asked where Mike came from, I said. Never asked about his father. Never asked about our life before he met you. You just decided I was something to be embarrassed about. Something to hide. I'm sorry, she said. Her voice broke on the second word. I didn't. I never meant. You never meant to what? I asked. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. Just tired. You never meant to hurt me? Or you never meant for anyone to find out? She didn't have an answer for that. The room was still full of people, her friends, her neighbors, her carefully cultivated social circle. But right then, in that moment, Jessica looked more alone than anyone I've ever seen. Here's what's going to happen, I said. Thomas is going to take his photographs. All of us. Together. Me, you, Mike, the baby. Because that's what families do. They take pictures together. Even when it's hard. Even when it's messy. Especially then. I reached out and took her hand. It was cold. Trembling. And then we're going to sit down and eat that food you spent all week preparing. And we're going to talk. Really talk. About Frank. About the house. About all the things you never asked about. And maybe, we can start over. Not as mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. Just as two people who love the same man and want what's best for him. Thomas raised his camera again. The room hadn't moved. Brenda was dabbing at her eyes with a napkin. The husbands had put their phones away. "Smile," Thomas said. And this time, when the flash went off, I felt like maybe, just maybe, we were all finally in focus. The rest of the afternoon went differently than anyone expected. Jessica's friends didn't leave right away. A few of them came up to me, one by one, and told me about their own mothers. Their own regrets. Brenda hugged me so hard I thought my ribs might crack. The food was good. The baby woke up and I got to hold her for a while, rocking her in the chair by the window while the sun went down. She grabbed my finger with her tiny hand and didn't let go. Thomas stayed for dinner. Sat next to Mike and told him stories about Frank. Stories I'd never heard. Stories about my husband laughing in the middle of a war zone. Making everyone feel brave just by being there. Mike cried. First time I'd seen him cry since his father's funeral. He held my hand under the table and didn't let go. And Jessica, well, something changed in Jessica that day. I'm not saying she became a different person overnight. People don't work that way. But she started asking questions. Started listening. Started looking at me like I was a person instead of a problem. A month later, she showed up at my door with a bag of groceries and an old photo album she'd found at a flea market. "I thought you might like this," she said. "It's empty. I thought maybe we could fill it together." We did. It's sitting on my coffee table now. Full of pictures. Old ones of Frank and me. New ones of Mike and Jessica and the baby. And right in the middle, there's one of me and Jessica, arms around each other, laughing at something stupid Mike said. I'm wearing a new sweater in that picture. Blue. Cashmere. Jessica bought it for me. Said it matched my eyes. I still wear the old one sometimes. The one with the patches on the sleeves. It's comfortable. Familiar. Reminds me of Frank and the life we built together. But the new one's nice too. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, new things can be nice.